because we live in a world where we look at our phones 100 times a day, and it's not a good interface, right? We're not super concentrating on our phones, and we're not super concentrating on real life. Uh, this will change. It's a big problem that smart people are trying to solve. If the killer app is people, then the network effect becomes very important. You'll use VR more when more people are using it. So it was sort of like email in the early 90s, or cell phones 10 years later. You couldn't be without one. One of the big themes that's developing in tech is the Internet of Things. I won't get into this in too much detail in this presentation, but when we start talking about augmented reality, the Internet of Things and its integration into your device becomes more important. I'm a little skeptical on some of the applications we're seeing where your refrigerator and your coffee maker are operated by your device. I am not sure that that is really what people will be doing in 20 years. But supposedly, your coffee maker is going to know when you want coffee, and it's going to be communicating with your personal digital assistant, and hopefully you'll be wearing all this, and it'll be seamless. So Robert Scoble, who's written four books on virtual reality, just came out with a new book about augmented reality, and he calls it the fourth transformation. So, in his view, in the long term, we'll all be wearing things like the HoloLens instead of looking at our laptops and our phones. Next slide. So it's interesting to look at how fast people are starting to adopt technology. When you think about how slow it was in the 20th century, in the 21st century, it really takes less than 10 years for an experimental consumer product like the laptop or the smartphone to be penetrated throughout the world, as the smartphone is. Next slide. And this is just, and so what we see is that adoption rates are very fast now, right? Smartphone, 4 years to reach 68%. It took MP3 players, this is a few years ago, 4 years to penetrate. Computers, went much faster. Let's go to the next slide. That's not a great slide. Sorry about that. Okay, so VR, where are we? Well, we saw HTC and Oculus, which is part of Facebook now, release high-end headsets that can do amazing things. They have problems right now, including customer support. So, this makes it you have to have a high-end computer. It could cost you upwards of $2,000, and if it doesn't work, you're out of luck. So I think that there are obstacles to the adoption of that, and I think it mostly is here to demonstrate the potential. PlayStation is a little more real. They have 52 million PlayStation 4s that are compatible with PSVR. They're not giving out numbers on how many PSVRs they've sold. They only have a few games that are optimized or made specifically for VR, so the jury is still out there. But the big success story was Samsung shipping 5 million Gears, Samsung Gears. So, we're seeing an example of the lower end, less expensive plug-and-play devices have faster penetration. I mean, there are 20 million Google Cardboards out there. Google hasn't said how many Google Daydreams they've put out there, but it's like the Gear, an interesting product that as more phones are compatible with it, we'll see faster adoption. Next slide, please. But 2016 was not the year of VR. As I said, it's expensive. There are ease of use issues. The headsets have ergonomic issues. They're tethered. They're not wireless, although that's changing. There's no audio integration on the HTC Vive. You're still looking through an optical system, which is relatively low resolution, so that you get an effect that people call the screen door effect, because you're seeing the pixels. So it looks like even the most beautiful, highly rendered images, you're looking at through a screen door. So if we go to the next slide, there's a very famous business school slide about crossing the chasm with the adoption of new technology. I think there's no question we're in the early adopter phase. Maybe we're at the smaller chasm at this point, although 5 million Samsung Gear says that we're not. But it takes some time for the enthusiasm of early adopters to infect other people, and I think that it's clear that that has not happened for VR yet. Next slide, please. So what's happened in 2017? Well, 360 video is happening. It has support from Facebook. It has support from YouTube. There are low-cost ways for people to now shoot 360 video. Of course, you could do that on an iPhone right now without an adapter, but if you have an adapter, you get true 360 in every direction, and you can post that on YouTube or Facebook. And there's some areas like travel photography where there is a lot of consumer activity, and so 360 video is a better way of doing that. I think you're also starting to see a lot of mainstream television companies producing 360 video. Discovery does it, National Geographic does it, USA Today, Gannett does it. They're treating it like regular episodic weekly programming. They take you to amazing places, they do amazing high-end photography there, and then you watch it through the screen door of your phone. One thing that is happening and is sort of invisible to people on the consumer side is how actively companies, particularly manufacturing companies like GE, are working on AR solutions. So imagine you have the HoloLens and you're, fixing a turbine engine, and instead of constantly referring to plans or your laptop, there in your heads-up display, floating next to the turbine or the part that you're looking at is a detailed schematic, and you might even, wearing that headset, have access to experts or engineers who, by nodding or snapping your fingers could communicate with you about what you're looking at. So, those are big things, and, a $3,000 HoloLens is really meaningless to GE if they got a 1% increase in efficiency. So most manufacturing businesses would take that all day long. There is a lot happening in the area called location-based entertainment, or V-arcades. As I said, some of this technology, principally the higher end technology, is not really good for consumers, but you could, Richard Streiber, the president of HTC, told me they were going into the equivalent of internet cafes with the Vive so that people could try it and get familiarized with it. It would then be an attended experience, and it would be a good way to start exposing people to the product as it gets more friendly toward consumers. They are fixing some of the problems that they have. For example, they're introducing a wireless system for the Vive. But all those systems and all those upgrades, improved tracking, and so forth are going to cost money, and they're going to pass those costs on to the consumer. So the price of a high-end HTC Gear setup is going up. It's not going down, although it's getting better. And there's no doubt in the next 24 months they'll come out with upgraded headsets that have better optics and are going to far exceed what the phones are doing. But as a result of that, I don't think we're going to see fast consumer adoption on the high end. Next slide. But there are a lot of things going on in haptics, eye tracking. Both Facebook and Google are looking at, have recently bought companies that do eye tracking. So imagine your eyeball as your mouse, while you're looking at a heads-up display. There are people experimenting with social VR. I have a major piece coming out about social VR. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we're talking about really the future, because social VR today really is, Second Life, World of Warcraft. There's a new company called AltSpace VR that's trying to produce a slicker, better, simpler, easier way to be in social VR, which is essentially a shared three-dimensional space with another person, another real person. With the Facebook has Oculus rooms that are available for Gear VR, and in Oculus rooms you can only occupy the space with your Facebook friends, which makes sense. So it's not really in a place where you can do effective social discovery. I'm talking about alt space and Oculus rooms, but you could occupy them and start to play with them with your friends. So again, they'd have to be high-end computer literate friends, but I'm told it works great on the Gear also. Next slide. So that is sort of the state of VR and AR as it stands, in my opinion, at the beginning of 2017. But I do think this is so early in the game, it's really hard to handicap which of these systems is going to be around even 3 years from now. I think we're going to see a lot of attrition. We're going to see a lot of surprise, and so I'll talk about that now. But this is sort of speculative, this part of the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so one thing I think is pretty clear is that, as I mentioned before, I think 360 video is hitting an inflection point. And whether we call it VR or not, certainly a lot of people are going to be looking at it wearing, a headset rather than, moving their finger along their mouse pad, although they can. The Views was recently introduced. It's a $1,000 multi-sensor 3D 360 camera. That is pretty freaking amazing. It's $1,000. Gyroptic has come out with an accessory for the iPhone. Basically, you clip it like a lot of other lenses over the lens in your camera, and it gives you a very, very good 360. And I mean, if you don't want to rent the $20,000 Ozo VR from your local, Panavision professional rental, you can get by pretty well with a Gyroptic, given that everybody is looking at it through a screen door. I think that this is an example, 360 video, of people doing what they're already doing, and it's just making it better and easier. It's getting easier to edit your 360, 360 videos you take. And as I said, we're seeing a lot of corporate activity in this area. So I think 360 programming is going to be, socialized by them through mass media. The New York Times is, you can't be a New York Times reader without knowing that they have 360 video programming. Next slide, please. Mobile VR will accelerate because it's inexpensive. And it's a great way to look at 360 videos. Latency is still an issue. Latency is where your head and your field of view are not in sync, and it creates nausea. There are better processors coming out that will minimize that, but that is still going to be an issue for some people. That said, there is a processor called the Snapdragon processor, which will be the new state-of-the-art by the end of the year for any Android phone, and that is going to make AR and VR on the mobile platform a lot better with much fewer latency problems. But it's a little harder to monetize than the games market, right? So if you have a high-end Vive, you're there buying games, you didn't spend $2,000 not to buy a bunch of software that's only, $20 to $50, and I think that's sort of the Oculus approach too. So that's consistent with high-end PC gaming. But on the lower end, people are buying mobile apps that are $3, so it's harder to monetize. That's why I say that. As this becomes, as mobile VR grows and it starts to integrate communications like messaging, you can expect the carriers to work harder to integrate it into handsets, and I think we'll see that as early as next year. Next slide, please. So, but here are the knowns unknowns, the known unknowns, right? These are things that are going to happen in the next 24 months that are going to really reorder the deck here, and the winners may be losers, and the losers may be winners, and the turnabout is going to be fast. Never bet against Microsoft. Even though the HoloLens is not a consumer product, they have licensed it to a lot of their technology to a lot of manufacturers to make $500 versions of the HoloLens. So that we will see next year. iPhone, according to Robert Scoble and others, is poised to make a big AR announcement. As I said, they recently bought an eye tracking technology company and other AR companies. They have said things about the importance of AR to them, to their strategy. So, a big announcement from Apple could be industry changing. Google is tied up with Magic Leap. Magic Leap is a startup that uses retina scanning, so it actually broadcasts images onto your retina that you see an illusion of them floating in front of you as holograms. The technology is real. How it can be consumerized or productized is as yet unknown, but Google has not announced, they're one of the major stakeholders in Magic Leap, and they have not announced any activity other than Daydream, which they continue to improve on, but you can't help but think they're waiting for Magic Leap. Oculus is going to keep going thanks to Facebook, but I think you will see a lot more focus on Samsung Gear platform, which is powered by Oculus, and not so much the Oculus Rift for the reasons that I articulated. There's a dark horse player out there, ODG, that licensed some of the technology that's used by the HoloLens, and now they're coming out with a consumer device. And these are, like the HoloLens, completely contained wearable computers that you look through. So, ODG is saying by the end of the year, by Q4, they will have, $800 computers that you can wear that will do augmented reality. So, if true, and if it's as great as they say and their demos look, it could certainly change the business and the way we're thinking about it right now. So, that something like one of these things is going to happen. Next slide. 2017, as it's turning out, may be the year of augmented reality, right? Augmented reality is essentially digital images that are projected into the real world. So that's what the HoloLens does, right? It doesn't erase the real world and replace it with another one. It simply is overlaying information. And of course, merged reality is when those projections can actually interact with the space that you're in. And we'll see more applications like that. But what is AR is a big debate, right? Pokemon Go just made $1 billion. Now, is that AR because it's digital characters overlaid onto the real world? If that's AR, well, then isn't everything that Snapchat does with its filters AR? But there is something going on with AR. Microsoft has a technology called holoportation, where two people can occupy the same space virtually, so that if you lived in Portland and I'm in New York and you want to sit next to me on the couch, if we're both wearing our HoloLenses, you can do that. So this technology is not commercialized yet, but if there are lower cost HoloLenses and smartphones are involved in some way, as I'm sure they will be, well, that's a communications product that you can expect the carriers to be extremely interested in. AR has other advantages over VR. I mean, VR is suffocating, right? I mean, I'm, a big guy, so I put on my VR goggles and I do stuff, and I start to sweat, and I feel a little nauseous because the latency is still not what it should be. There are a lot of reasons why I would rather be in a relatively unrestrained wireless environment wearing a HoloLens or ODG glasses or some other product which solved my problem of constantly looking at my cell phone, projects information that I want, and so I think that is ultimately where things are going. As science fiction-y as it sounds, I don't think we're 10 years away from that. So predictions for 2017, there will be big announcements in 2017. There's a lot of new technology on the horizon that is going to change this category a lot. Next slide, please. So this is a really incomplete slide, but it shows you just how many companies are innovating right now, in devices, in content. All the studios, for example, are trying to make 360 content and trying to think about what VR content would be. A VR film, so to speak, a VR experience that was shown at Sundance has been nominated for an Academy Award. So, this stuff is in the air and will continue to be because it's sexy and science fiction-y, and it's really going to happen. So if you remember how people talked about smartphones in 2000, or how they talked about personal computing and the internet in the early 90s, I think that's where we are. Last slide. So, that's why people like Goldman Sachs and others are, thinking that this is going to be an $80 billion market. I think if some of the more dramatic things happen and some of the more dramatic technologies come onto the market, then that 80 billion in 2025 is going to be completely blown out of the water. So this is going to be a very, very big growth area in computing, and needless to say, a lot of new billionaires are going to be made. So with that said, I thank you all for sitting all the way through this. I hope you found it informative. This deck is on SlideShare, so you can access it if you want and share it with other people. So any questions? Anybody want to talk about any of the issues that I touched on?
So Charlie, thanks very much. Great presentation. I'm going to leave it open for a minute or two. We don't have any questions at the moment, but we have a good sized audience. So there was something on one of the slides I wasn't quite sure I understood, and I wanted to kind of ask you about. Let's see, where was it?
Yeah, I tried to do the good speaker thing and not read my slides.
I didn't quite. Yeah, I didn't understand. Mobile and 360 video are homies. What do you mean by that?
I think that you can watch 360 videos on your phone wherever you are. Right. So if you have the little Gear VR or Daydream headset in your backpack, you can do 360 video wherever you are. So 360 video and mobile phones go together really well.
Okay. And do you have
so
you been
basically everybody can see a 360 video, even if you don't have a headset. So I think that's going to make it, democratize it as a platform.
Got it. Have you been following the lawsuit with Facebook? Are you able to talk to that?
Just like everybody else, I've read the fascinating sound bites coming out of the trial, and I don't know what to think. I have no handicapping on the outcome. I mean, they're asking for $2 billion for their patents and $2 billion in damages. Given that Facebook is going to suffer billions of dollars of losses in VR and over the Oculus, I can't see how there's an argument for that. But I don't know. Does anybody else have any ideas about that? Do you, Bob?
I haven't been keeping on top of it. I've seen that it's been going through. I think from something I saw just the other day, it's gone to jury now.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Sarah. Something that doesn't seem to get talked about much is the potential to replace in-person meetings. The holoportation seems to be the killer app for that. What do you think?
I agree with that. But, I think that, yes, I agree with that. I think it can revolutionize certain businesses, the in-person sales call, customer support. And imagine, watching the Super Bowl with your friends, in other cities. So I think that's going to happen. It's going to be awesome. There's a lot of skepticism that it will be soon. But the app is so compelling that you have to believe as AR devices come online that communications is going to be the or a killer app, and the carriers and everybody else is going to want to make it happen.
Has holoportation, has that application been demonstrated yet? You know?
It has been, and there are some good videos about it. Um, and Case Western, which has been doing a lot of pioneering work, particularly in the medical field, in this science field, and looking at educational applications for the HoloLens, has been using it with colleagues from around the country. So, they've got this, amazing anatomy application, and doctors have, stood there with other doctors in Cleveland, doctors in Seattle, and they have, discussed the model. So, that is a fantastic, fantastic science fiction application right out of Star Wars that is going to happen. It's just a question of when.
Well,
But the
I think
technology exists.
I think a good article webinar right there is maybe the state of in-person meetings via VR. What it's looking like, who the players are. Besides Microsoft.
Yeah. Well, I think that certainly AltSpace would like a piece of that also. So, social VR is as they call it, but I think it's going to be more communications oriented. It is the thing that everybody is going to do. That and social media.
Okay.
Like there will be a social application that, you spend all your day on Facebook, you'll spend all your day doing it with a AR headset. What it'll look like and feel like holographically is an open question.
And Jackson just gave you a shout out. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Jackson.
So, Charlie, thanks very much today. Great, good presentation. Audience,
Great.
thanks for
Thank you
joining
guys for
us.
listening. Yeah, very
And
flattering.
we've got two presentations scheduled for next week on Tuesday and Thursday. They are on the website and under industry events if you want to take a look at those and register. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So again, Charlie, thanks for your time today, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Okay, bye. All right, Bob, I'm logging off.